Draco hesitated, frowning, resentment flickering across his face. He knew his parents were about to discuss something vital and he longed to be included, but his father's iron command left no room for refusal. With visible reluctance, he turned and climbed back upstairs to fetch his bedding. Narcissa escorted Draco all the way into the study before turning back toward a small room 30 feet down the corridor. "What on earth happened, my dear?" She burst out the moment they stepped inside. "What do those werewolves want?" Greyback came to the door with a pack of them. With only his wife present, Lucius no longer bothered to hide his exhaustion. He slumped into a chair, pressed his fingers to his brow, and shut his eyes. "He wants me to help him track down an enemy." As his partner in all things, Narcissa was quick to understand. The one who's humiliated them so many times, the Golden Viper? Without waiting for confirmation, her anger flared. "Why don't they go to Cacasflia? He knows that cesspit better than we ever have." But once Lucius recounted his exchange with Greyback, Narcissa's whole body shook with fury. "He dared threaten you?" Her wand hand trembled in the air. "Does he think we're easy prey? Filthy, stinking vermin. How dare they threaten you, threaten the Malfoy name, trespass into my son's rooms? I swear I'll see every last one of them destroyed." Lucius' expression was grim, his eyes fixed on his wand. He gave no reply to her tirade. "I don't care what it costs," Narcissa pressed on, pacing the room in rage. "Go to the Ministry. Go to Fudge. If he'll order the Aurors to hunt down every werewolf in Britain, we'll pay him whatever sum he asks. And the underworld, too. We'll post a bounty. 1,000 galleons for every werewolf corpse. I'll see them all wiped out." "Moody and Scrimgeour have hunted Greyback for over a decade," Lucius rasped, "and haven't so much as touched a hair from his mangy hide. They're craftier than sewer rats. The Ministry hasn't the means to net them all. And," he looked at her, breath shallow, "we both know it would bring endless reprisals. Do you remember what we did in the Dark Lord's service? When we caught rebels and their families? The Cruciatus until they broke, and the killing curse to end them. Greyback won't waste the killing curse on us. He has other ways, worse ways. It's for that very talent that the Dark Lord took him in." Narcissa fell silent. Her hysteria had been born of fear, fear of exactly the fate her husband had described. They sat like that for a long time, side by side, wordless. "Will you help him then?" Narcissa asked at last, her voice raw with bitterness. "The Auror office has been quietly investigating the identities of underworld wizards. They've uncovered some names. I'll go to Fudge, demand to see the list." Lucius tilted his head back, staring up at the enchanted chandelier. His words lacked conviction. He knew, as she did, that the chance of success was nearly nil. In truth, what he'd told Greyback was not entirely a lie. Since the Dark Lord's fall, he had worked hard to sever ties with that world. Even with Cacasflia, a fellow pure blood, his contact had dwindled to almost nothing. The lamplight was gentle, yet staring at it too long left Lucius's eyes raw and aching. He shut them again, rubbing at his lids to banish the strange prismatic shapes that swam in his vision. And then, suddenly, from the blur of light, a figure surfaced. A figure Lucius remembered too well and feared beyond reason. Amostar Brain. Last Christmas, this man had appeared before him in his role as Hogwarts governor, seizing control of the Chamber of Secrets affair. In barely 3 months, Brain had unraveled an elaborate plot Lucius had spent years laying. And this man had secured the backing of most of the school governors through Carcass's connections. He wasn't famous, but his power was intimidating. He gave the impression of being gentle and mild, yet his methods were ruthlessly cold. Combined with his ties to Carcass, Malfoy was certain of it. Amostar Brain was also a wizard who had long moved within the underworld. "He seems to think well of Draco. Perhaps I could use him to dig for news about the Golden Viper?" Lucius hesitated, but then he remembered that pleasant encounter at the Leaky Cauldron, and the thought quickly died. He hoped Draco would grow closer to the man, yes, but as for himself, unless left with no choice, he would never willingly deal with him again. Chapter 143, Meeting Again. Amostar had no idea that a silent plot woven by Greyback was already drawing near. Of course, even if he had known, he might have welcomed it. Thanks to his journey to Avalon, his strength had advanced significantly. To let his suddenly expanded magic settle and harmonize with his body, he had retreated for several quiet days in a secluded countryside inn outside London. Only once he had fully adjusted did he pack his things and return to the wizarding world. The moment he stepped into the leaky cauldron, his gaze swept across the shadowed hall, and the crease between his brows tightened. As the gateway between the muggle world and the wizarding one, the leaky cauldron should have been bustling at this time of summer. The air ought to have been thick with the sense of food and ale. Instead, the bar was dim, dirty, and strangely empty. Only a few figures huddled in the corners, wrapped up to the point of obscurity, puffing on long-stemmed pipes. Amasta spared them a casual glance or two, his expression unchanging, though a flicker of suspicion stirred within him. As an old hand of the underworld, he could smell its stench clinging to them. That alone wasn't strange. What was odd was that when he observed them out of the corner of his eye, seemingly without intent, he found them watching him just as openly. Their stares carried no disguise, only naked scrutiny, and that was not normal. Any wizard who had spent time in the underground knew the first rule: never be too curious. Unless you were set on making someone your enemy, you never stared too hard or too long. Otherwise, misunderstandings, dangerous ones, were inevitable. These men were from that world. They couldn't possibly be ignorant of this rule. Vitia Cleona. The first thought that came to Amasta's mind was whether that woman, the one who had slipped from his grasp, had revealed his true identity. Could she have drawn out a group of old enemies of the Golden Viper to lie in wait for him? Yet, the more he thought on it, the less likely it seemed. Not because he believed Vitya incapable of betrayal, but because if she had, he would have known far sooner. He still had contacts in the underworld, friends like Fleury, who were well informed. If his identity had been exposed, word would have reached him already. As suspicion weighed on him, the group by the wall withdrew their gazes. They exchanged discreet looks, shook their heads, then bent once more over their pipes and half-finished rum. They're searching for someone. But it isn't me. Amasta narrowed his eyes, clarity dawning, and let his stride return to normal. At that moment, a large family bustled in from the other side of the bar. Burdened with bags and trunks, they hurried forward, keeping a small boy of 6 or 7 firmly in the center. "Mum, why are we suddenly going to Paris?" The boy, almost dragged along, pouted and resisted, unhappiness plain on his face. "Oh, darling, I've told you already, several times. It's because your grandmother isn't well, and we must visit her." The flustered witch, hair unkempt as though she'd left home in a rush, spoke quickly and breathlessly. "You're lying, Mum. I know the real reason." The boy's round face tightened in a childish scowl, indignant at her evasion. "It's because of that little—" "Silence, Beck!" As Amasta passed by, the little boy's father shot him a wary glance and, in the sternest tone, snapped, "This isn't something to discuss in public. We don't know who's trustworthy." Amasta turned his head to watch the family leave the leaky cauldron, their figures quickly vanishing from sight. When he looked back, he noticed the group by the wall had also withdrawn their gaze. Their eyes had briefly met in midair before darting elsewhere. Something had happened, and it was clearly no small matter. Sensing the tense air, Amasta drew that conclusion effortlessly. "Wait a moment. Let me think. Ah, yes, Minister. Room 11 is still available. You can put him there." The voice came from the aisle by the bar. Amasta recognized it immediately as Tom, the hunchbacked owner of the leaky cauldron. "Minister." Amasta's eyes flickered. "Dinner time, and the busy Minister of Magic should be attending some high society pure-blood gathering. Yet here you are, personally arranging a room for someone at the leaky cauldron?" The thought flashed through Amasta's mind, and within a second he made a decision. He would not meet Cornelius Fudge for the time being. From the 2 previous encounters surrounding the Chamber of Secrets, he had already seen Fudge for what he truly was, a typical politician. The rule of a competent politician was simple. Can this person be useful? Will they bring me profit? Amasta had no desire to entangle himself deeply with politicians, especially someone like the Minister of Magic. Connections were valuable, yes, but the cost and the inevitable trouble was immense. Well, it doesn't matter, as long as it's comfortable. Right, Potter's luggage. "I'll deliver Mr. Potter's luggage to his room. No need to worry, Minister," the bar owner said, eager to please. Potter. Amasta froze mid-step, staring down the corridor in disbelief. How many wizards named Potter would merit the personal attention of a high-ranking Minister of Magic? But Potter should have been spending the summer at his aunt and uncle's house. How could he suddenly appear at the Leaky Cauldron? Only a week had passed since their last meeting. Amasta was certain he hadn't misremembered the date. The footsteps from deeper inside the inn grew faint. Amasta squinted, then quickly shifted to a friendlier expression. He stepped past the partition by the bar and, spotting the short, stout wizard in the striped cloak, waved and called out, "Please hold Minister Fudge." Fudge, about to climb the stairs, froze. He turned toward the young man greeting him, confusion flickering in his eyes. Within moments, though, that confusion gave way to a spark of surprise, softening the fatigue etched across his brow. "Well, look who we have here." Fudge approached with a warm smile, arms opening toward Amasta. Recipient of the second-class Merlin Medal, the young wizard who solved the Slytherin Chamber of Secrets and donated a most precious basilisk to the ministry, Amostar Brain. The Leaky Cauldron was quiet, and the sound of Amasta and the minister exchanging greetings rang harshly in the empty space. Eyes from the corner, including those of the lingering patrons, turned toward them. Amasta did not want the encounter to become public knowledge. He glanced at Tom, the hunchback bar owner, and was surprised to see that the man showed none of the shock he had expected. "Oh, Mr. Brain, I know Hagrid fairly well. I've heard him mention you once or twice," said Tom tactfully, bowing his head with downcast eyes. Amasta pressed his lips together, feeling as though 1,000 wild beasts were stampeding through his chest. "A modest young man who likes to keep a low profile, I see," said Fudge, eyes twinkling with amusement. "Still, I'd say a touch of fame now and then isn't such a bad thing." I only hope our conversation doesn't drift into the ears of certain unsavory types," Amasta replied with a smile, then casually pushed open the door of a nearby private booth. "Would I be fortunate enough to buy you a drink?" Fudge hesitated, then nodded. "Well, I suppose I'll take the chance to put something in my stomach. You can't imagine how many days it's been since I've had a proper meal. Tom, there's a boy upstairs still waiting for me. Keep an eye on him for now." Once they stepped into the quiet of the private room, the lightness faded from Fudge's round face. Even without close scrutiny, the weight of disappointment and weariness upon the sitting Minister of Magic was plain to see. Amasta sipped at his sweet wine, eyes idly fixed on the wall sconce, patiently waiting while Fudge finished his buttered bread. "I owe you my thanks, Amasta," Fudge said at last. He raised his glass, downed the rum in 2 gulps to clear his mouth, then let out a long sigh before smiling wanly. "That beast Slytherin left us made quite a spectacle. Ministers from several countries have written to me personally, asking permission for the basilisk to tour abroad. Oh, of course, it's really the name of Salazar Slytherin that draws them." Months ago, the basilisk had meant little to Amasta beyond the bounty promised for completing the commission. Handing it over hadn't mattered. But after what he'd lived through on Avalon, he now wondered if that decision had been reckless. The creature might well hide deeper secrets. "It will serve a greater purpose in the ministry's hands, Minister," Amasta said with a polite smile, setting his glass aside. "That poor basilisk lost its sight to Dumbledore's phoenix and suffered several of my own curses. I half thought it wouldn't last. How is it faring now?" "Alive and kicking, brimming with energy," Fudge admitted, though a shade of embarrassment flickered across his plump face. "Truth be told, perhaps too much energy. More troublesome than a dragon. A few of our lads in the Department for the Regulation and Control of Magical Creatures nearly— well, in any case, about those foreign invitations, some are difficult to refuse. For safety's sake, we've brought in a master of magical creatures to tame it for a while." Amasta gave a slight nod, already turning over in his mind whether he should one day retrieve the basilisk from Newt Scamander's hands. "Forgive me for being forward, Minister." Neither man had planned to linger long over this impromptu meal. Once Amasta had confirmed who held the basilisk, a few pleasantries passed, and he let just the right touch of curiosity show. "You look quite worn, sir. Has the ministry run into some difficulty of late?" But if it's classified, pretend I never asked." "What, haven't you heard, Amasta?" Fudge's short brows shot up in astonishment. "It's already common knowledge. I've spent some time in the Muggle world recently, so—" "Difficulty?" Fudge's jowls shook as he wagged his head furiously, his whole face collapsing. No, you can't call it a difficulty. It's a disaster. Not mine alone, but the whole ministry's. And I don't mind telling you, Amasta, in all my tenure as minister, I've never faced anything so dire. Amasta said nothing, quietly waiting for him to reveal more. Someone has escaped from Azkaban. Amasta's gaze flickered. Before heading to Hogwarts, he had seen a bounty offered through Carcass for rescuing the Lestranges and the Caro siblings. Could it be someone had pulled it off? 200,000 galleons! It's Sirius Black! Finally, Fudge spoke the name in a voice heavy with despair, bordering on collapse.